The victory dinner was held in the grand ballroom of the Meridian Tower, the same tower my company had just acquired in a hostile takeover that had made headlines across 3 continents. 300 guests filled the room. Investors, journalists, politicians, and every employee who had believed in Aurora Ventures when it was nothing but a laptop in a coffee shop. I stood at the head of the central table, wearing a gown of emerald silk I had bought specifically for this night, my hand wrapped around a champagne glass, my heart full of something I had almost forgotten how to feel. Pride. Real, uncomplicated pride. I was 31 years old. I had spent 9 years building Aurora Ventures from a fledgling startup into the largest female-led technology investment firm in North America. The Meridian acquisition was our 23rd and most significant victory, a deal that would reshape the commercial real estate landscape and cement our position as an industry powerhouse. The press had called me a visionary. The investors had called me relentless. MY Mother, in her final phone call before cancer took her voice, had called me unstoppable. And beside me, his hand resting on my shoulder with the easy familiarity of a man who had been there since the beginning, was my fiancé, Damon Cross. 41 years old, silver-templed, square-jawed, the chief operating officer of Aurora Ventures. We had met 9 years ago at a startup pitch competition. I had been a nervous 22-year-old with a business plan and a trembling voice. He had been a seasoned venture capitalist who pulled me aside afterward and told me my idea was brilliant, but my presentation was terrible. He had offered to coach me that I had accepted. And over the years, that coaching relationship had become a friendship, then a partnership, then a love story that the business press adored. Or so I believed, and I believed all of it. Every smile, every promise, every late-night strategy session, every kiss. I believed I had found a man who saw me as an equal, who loved my ambition instead of fearing it, who wanted to build something together. I believed it so completely that I had given him 35% of my company without hesitation, that I had given him the COO title, the corner office, the key to my apartment, and my absolute trust. I was a fool. Damon stood up and tapped his champagne glass. The room fell silent. He smiled his practiced smile, the one that crinkled his eyes without touching anything deeper. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he said. "This victory belongs to everyone at Aurora Ventures, but it belongs most of all to one person, and a woman whose vision built this company. A woman whose brilliance has inspired all of you as my fiancée, Serafina Vance." Applause thundered. I smiled, lifting my glass in acknowledgement. Damon leaned down and kissed my cheek. And then he straightened up, and his expression shifted, the smile fading, replaced by something more serious, more practiced. "But tonight isn't just about the company," he continued. "Tonight, I need to share some personal news. News that is long overdue." He reached out his hand. A woman stepped forward from the shadows near the stage. She was wearing a crimson dress that matched the roses on every table, her dark hair swept up, diamonds glittering at her throat. She was my sister, my younger sister, Celia Vance. The woman I had raised after our mother died. The woman I had put through college, bought a car for, given a job at my company when no one else would hire her. She walked to Damon's side, and he took her hand, and she placed her other hand on her stomach, a stomach that, I realized with slow, dawning horror, was no longer flat. "Damon and I have been in love for 2 years, Celia said, her voice sweet and trembling. "And we're having a baby, a son, due in 4 months." The room went utterly silent. 300 faces turned toward me. I saw journalists reaching for their phones. I saw investors exchanging wide-eyed glances. I saw my employees, my loyal team, the people I had mentored and promoted and fought for, staring at me with expressions of shock and pity. "We didn't want to hurt you, Serafina," Damon said, his voice heavy with false regret. "But the situation has become unsustainable. You've been so focused on the company, so consumed by the deals, that there was no room left for us, for me, for a family. Celia understands me. She's willing to prioritize what matters. And now she's giving me the son you always said you were too busy to have." Too busy. I had said I wanted to wait until the Meridian deal closed. I had said that building the company was important to me, that I wanted to be financially secure before starting a family. And Damon had nodded and smiled and told me he understood completely. Therefore, Damon continued, effective immediately, I am assuming full control of Aurora Ventures. The restructuring documents have been prepared. MY legal team has reviewed them. The board has voted. Serafina will retain a minority stake, but the company's leadership, the CEO title, the voting shares, the strategic direction, will transfer to me. This is necessary, not just for the company's future, but for Serafina's well-being. She's been working too hard. She needs rest. She needs to step away and recover from the stress that has clearly been affecting her judgment. The board had voted. The board I had appointed. The board that was stacked with Damon's friends, Damon's allies, people I had trusted because he had asked me to trust them. Celia stepped forward, her hand still on her belly. Serafina, I'm sorry, I never meant for this to happen, but Damon and I are building something real to family, something you could never give him. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. Just sign the papers and go quietly. We'll take care of the company. We'll take care of everything. I looked at my sister, MY baby sister, the girl I had held when she cried over high school heartbreaks. The woman I had supported through college, through failed relationships, through a dozen half-hearted career attempts before I finally gave her a job. She was 28 years old, radiant with pregnancy, her hand intertwined with my fiancé's, her face arranged in an expression of sorrowful compassion that didn't quite hide the triumph underneath. And I remembered the night our mother died, 8 years ago. Celia had been 20, drunk at a frat party, and she hadn't answered her phone when the hospital called. I had sat alone in that cold, fluorescent room, holding our mother's hand as her breathing slowed and stopped. I had planned the funeral alone, paid for it alone, grieved alone. I remembered the day Celia came to me, 3 years ago, asking for a job. She had been fired from her 4th position in 2 years. I just need a chance, she'd said. Please, Sarah. You're my sister. And I had given her a chance, a title, a salary, an office to future. I remembered the night Damon proposed. 2 years ago, we had been on the rooftop of the Meridian Tower, the same tower I had just acquired, and he had knelt down with a ring and tears in his eyes. You're the most extraordinary woman I've ever met, he had said. I want to spend the rest of my life being worthy of you. 2 years. 2 years he had been sleeping with my sister. 2 years they had been planning this, and I had known nothing. Something inside me cracked, but what spilled out wasn't sorrow. It was clarity, cold, sharp, absolute clarity. I set down my champagne glass. That was a beautiful speech, I said, and my voice was steady, calm. The voice I used in negotiations when I was about to go to competitor. Did you rehearse it? It sounded rehearsed. Damon's eyes flickered. Serafina, please, don't make a scene. The documents are on the table. All you have to do is sign. Sign over my company, MY 9 years of work, MY 35% share of a $35 billion enterprise, TOU. To the man who just announced he's been betraying me for 2 years with my own sister. The company has outgrown you, Celia said, her sweet voice hardening. You were brilliant at the start, Sarah, but you're not a leader. You're a technician, a number cruncher. Damon is the visionary. He's the one who closed the Meridian deal. He's the one the investors trust. You've been coasting on his reputation for years, and everyone knows it. Damon had closed the Meridian deal. Damon, not me. That I had spent 11 months in negotiations, flown to 6 countries, personally convinced 37 stakeholders to sell their shares. Damon had attended 2 meetings and fallen asleep in one of them, but he had told the board it was his victory, and they had believed him. You're right about one thing, I said. The board did vote, but you made a mistake, Damon. You assumed I didn't know about the vote. You assumed I hadn't prepared. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. The board has 7 members, 0.4 of them voted with you, but before night, I called a meeting of the actual shareholders, not the board. The shareholders, And the shareholders, the people who own this company, voted differently. I pressed a button on my phone. The screen behind the stage flickered to life. The Aurora Ventures logo vanished, replaced by a document, a shareholder resolution, signed and notarized. Aurora Ventures is a privately held corporation, I said, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom. The board serves at the pleasure of the shareholders. And the shareholders, the institutional investors, the venture partners, the employee stock pool, control 65% of the voting power. I personally control another 10% through my family trust. Damon controls 0%. He was given 35% of the equity, but 0% of the voting shares. That was my mother's idea, actually. She told me never to give a man voting power over something I built. I thought she was being paranoid. IT turns out she was being prophetic. The document on the screen showed the vote tally. Unanimous. The board's restructuring was rejected. Damon's takeover was void, and my position as CEO and chairwoman was reaffirmed. Damon's face had gone white.
No.
No, you're lying. The voting shares, you told me I had voting shares. I let you believe you had voting shares. There's a difference. You spent 9 years thinking you were my partner. You were my employee, a well-paid, highly respected employee. But an employee nonetheless, and tonight you're fired. The doors at the back of the ballroom open. A woman in a perfectly cut charcoal suit strode in, flanked by 4 attorneys and a security detail, Margaret Chen, the CEO of Chen Capital, Aurora Ventures' largest institutional investor, and my mother's oldest friend, the woman who had taught me how to read a balance sheet when I was 12 years old. Madam Founder, Margaret said, her voice cutting through the chaos. The documentation has been reviewed. The attempted hostile takeover has been flagged MR. Cross's employment has been terminated, effective immediately. His access to all company assets has been frozen. And the legal team is prepared to file charges of fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy to commit corporate theft. You can't do this. Damon lunged toward me, but 2 security agents caught him. Serafina, I'm your fiancé. 9 years. I loved you in the beginning. I really did. But you were so focused on the company, so obsessed with the deals, there was no room for me. Celia made me feel seen. She made me feel like a man. Can't you understand that? I understand that you're a thief, I said calmly. You stole my trust. You stole my sister, and you tried to steal my company, but you can't steal a company that was never yours to begin with. Take him away, and Celia. Celia was backing toward the stage, her crimson dress catching on a chair, her face white. Sarah, please. I'm your sister. I'm pregnant. This is your nephew. This is your child, not mine, and you stopped being my sister the moment you chose him over me. I turned to Margaret. Make sure she's escorted out too. She's fired. She forfeits her shares. She forfeits her severance, and she is never to set foot in this building again. You can't do this, Celia shrieked. I'm family. You raised me. You're supposed to protect me. I did protect you. For 28 years, I protected you, and you repaid me by sleeping with my fiancé and trying to steal my company. You don't need my protection anymore. You need to face the consequences of your choices. Security, please remove them. They dragged Damon toward the doors, his shouts fading. Celia stumbled after him, her sobs echoing through the silent ballroom. When the doors closed behind them, the room erupted, not in horror, but in applause. Journalists were typing frantically. Investors were raising their glasses in salute. My employees, my loyal team, were on their feet, cheering. Margaret touched my elbow. Your mother would be proud of you. She always said this day would come. She just didn't know it would take so long. Thank you, Margaret, for everything. The legal team will handle the prosecution, but there's someone else who wants to speak with you. She gestured toward the back of the room. A man was standing near the doors. He was tall, silver-haired, with the quiet intensity of someone who had spent his life building things and the unexpected warmth of someone who had never forgotten where he came from. He was wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, and when our eyes met, he smiled. Adrian Sterling, the billionaire, the recluse, the man who owned Sterling Global, the largest investment conglomerate in the world. The man whose endorsement Damon had begged for, whose partnership he had chased for years. He walked toward me, his stride unhurried, his presence commanding. "Ms. Vance," he said, "I've been trying to get a meeting with you for 2 years. Your fiancé, ex-fiancé, kept blocking my calls, but I think I understand why now." He extended his hand. "I watched what just happened. You handled it with more composure than most CEOs I've seen in 30 years. I'd like to discuss a partnership between Sterling Global and Aurora Ventures." A real partnership, not a takeover, not a merger, but a strategic alliance. I took his hand. "I'm listening." "Good, because I think you and I are going to build something extraordinary together." The investigation that followed was swift and devastating. Damon Cross was charged with fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged documents, the bribed board members, the 2-year affair, the financial trail. He was convicted on 18 counts and sentenced to 14 years in federal prison. His assets were seized. His reputation was destroyed. The last I heard, he was working in the prison laundry, telling anyone who would listen about the empire his ex-fiancée had stolen from him. Celia Vance was charged with conspiracy and cooperation in fraud. Her pregnancies spared her prison. She received 5 years of probation and a permanent ban from serving as an officer in any corporation. She gave birth to a daughter, not a son, in a public hospital. Her child was taken in by our father, who had divorced our mother years ago and had been absent for most of our lives. The last I heard, Celia was living in a 1-bedroom apartment in New Jersey, working as a receptionist at a nail salon. She sent me a letter once, asking for forgiveness, but I didn't reply. Aurora Ventures entered a new golden age. The alliance with Sterling Global gave us access to markets we had never been able to reach. We acquired 12 more companies in the next 5 years, expanding into Europe, Asia, and South America. I was named CEO of the Year by Forbes, Fortune, and the Wall Street Journal. I gave speeches at Davos and TED, telling the story of how I had built an empire from nothing and defended it from the people who tried to steal it. And Adrian Sterling. Adrian became something I hadn't expected in a partner, first in business, then in life. We were married 3 years after the victory dinner in a small ceremony on his family's estate in the Hamptons. Margaret Chen was my matron of honor. MY Mother's photograph sat in the front row. On our wedding night, Adrian asked me why I had agreed to marry him after everything I had survived. "Because you never tried to take anything from me," I said. "You never asked me to step aside. You never told me my ambition was unfeminine. You never made me feel like I had to choose between being loved and being powerful. You saw the woman I was, the woman who had fought for everything she had, and you loved her. Not in spite of her strength, but because of it." "I loved you the moment I saw you," he said. At that victory dinner, standing in front of 300 people, dismantling your ex-fiancé's plot with the calm precision of a surgeon. I thought, that's her. That's the woman I've been waiting for my entire life. And now I get to spend the rest of my life being worthy of you. I kissed him, and I thought about the woman I had been, the one who had believed in love and trust and partnership. She had been naive, but she had also been strong enough to survive betrayal, strong enough to rebuild, strong enough to love again, on her own terms. 10 years after the victory dinner, I stood on the rooftop of the Meridian Tower, now renamed the Vance Tower, looking out at the city. MY Company was thriving. MY marriage was strong. My legacy was secure. Somewhere, Damon Cross was sitting in a prison cell. Somewhere, Celia was living a life of quiet obscurity, and I was here alive, free, victorious. Not because I was lucky, not because I was cruel, but because I had finally learned that the woman they called too ambitious was the woman worth everything. And I was just getting started.